The first time Alex Gordon smiled at the mysterious man in the charcoal suit, she had no idea that single moment would change the trajectory of her entire life. She slid his whiskey neat across the polished mahogany bar of the Meridian Hotel's upscale lounge, noticing how his eyes, a striking shade of blue that reminded her of summer skies, lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," he said, his voice a deep baritone that somehow carried over the ambient jazz playing in the background. "Excellent service as always." Alex tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and nodded professionally. "Just doing my job, sir. Let me know if you need anything else." That was 3 months ago. Now, as Alex methodically polished glasses behind the bar on a quiet Tuesday evening, she glanced at her watch. 7:58 p.m. Like clockwork, the door would swing open at 8 o'clock, and he would walk in the man she only knew as Mr. D from his credit card receipts. The Meridian was Boston's premier luxury hotel, which meant Alex served plenty of wealthy patrons during her shifts. But there was something different about this particular customer. He always sat at the same stool at the far end of the bar, ordered the same drink, and tipped generously without fanfare. Unlike many of the hotel's affluent clientele, he never flaunted his obvious wealth or spoke condescendingly to staff. The door opened precisely at 8 o'clock p.m., and there he was. Tonight, he wore a navy suit with no tie, looking slightly more relaxed than usual. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. "Good evening, Alex," he said, settling onto his usual stool. "Mr. D," she replied with a smile, already reaching for the bottle of Macallan 18 he preferred. "The usual," he nodded, loosening his collar button. "Please, and maybe you could tell me about your day. I could use some normal conversation after the one I've had." Alex raised an eyebrow as she poured his whiskey. In all these months, they'd exchanged pleasant small talk, but he'd never asked about her personally. "My day, nothing special. Class this morning, study session at the library, then straight here." She slid the glass toward him. "Sounds like yours was more interesting, if not particularly enjoyable." "Board meetings rarely are," he replied with a wry smile, taking a sip of his drink. "I'm Mason, by the way, Mason Drake." "Nice to formally meet you, Mason," Alex said, surprised by the sudden introduction. "So you're in business?" A shadow of amusement crossed his face. "Something like that." Before she could inquire further, a boisterous group of convention attendees entered the lounge, and Alex was swept up in a flurry of drink orders. When she finally had a moment to breathe, she noticed Mason watching her work, an appreciative look on his face. "You're good at this," he commented when she returned to his end of the bar. "Very efficient," Alex laughed. 5 years of bartending will do that, but it's just a means to an end." She hesitated, then added, "I'm in my final year of pharmacy school." Mason's eyebrows rose. "Impressive. Healthcare has always struck me as one of the most meaningful sectors. That's why I chose it. My mom got really sick when I was a teenager. The pharmacist who worked with us made such a difference in her care." Alex wasn't sure why she was sharing this with him. She rarely discussed her mother's illness with anyone, much less a customer. Mason nodded thoughtfully. "The people who help us navigate our darkest times are never forgotten." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Alex felt a connection that transcended their bartender-patron relationship. Then her manager appeared, breaking the spell. "Alex, could you handle table 6? Jenna had to leave early." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of cocktails and conversations. When Alex finally returned to check on Mason, she found his seat empty, with a generous tip and a business card left on the bar. The card was simple, with just his name and a phone number. On the back, he'd written, "In case you ever want to continue our conversation." Alex tucked the card into her pocket, telling herself it was just to be polite. But her heart beat a little faster at the thought of seeing him outside the confines of the Meridian's elegant lounge. The next evening, Mason didn't appear at his usual time. Alex told herself she wasn't disappointed as she mixed martinis for a couple celebrating their anniversary. When the clock struck 9:30 with still no sign of him, she accepted that he wasn't coming. "Looking for someone?" her coworker Ryan asked with a knowing smile. Just making sure we have enough ice for the late crowd, Alex replied, aware that her cheeks had flushed slightly. Ryan laughed. Right, nothing to do with your regular who leaves those impressive tips. Before Alex could defend herself, the lounge door opened and Mason walked in. He looked different today, more casual in dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders. He nodded to Alex with a small smile and took his usual seat. "Sorry I'm late," he said when she approached. "Had to wrap up some unexpected business in New York." Took the helicopter back just in time. Alex nearly dropped the glass she was holding. "Helicopter, like your company's helicopter?" Mason looked momentarily confused, then chuckled. "Yes, I suppose you could say that." "Must be some company," Alex murmured, trying to reconcile this new information with what little she knew about him. Mason took a sip of his whiskey, regarding her with those penetrating blue eyes. "Alex, I've been coming here for months now, and I think we both know it's not for the whiskey, excellent as it is." Her heart skipped a beat. "Oh, would you have dinner with me? When you're not working, of course." The question shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. Despite their easy rapport, Mason had always maintained a respectful distance. "I don't usually date customers," she said carefully. "Then I'll stop coming here," he replied without hesitation. "I'd rather have dinner with you once than keep pretending I'm just here for a drink." His directness was refreshing. Alex found herself smiling. "That won't be necessary. I'm free Friday night." The smile that spread across Mason's face made him look younger, more approachable. "Friday it is. I'll pick you up at 7. She wrote her address on a cocktail napkin and slid it across to him. 7 works. When Friday arrived, Alex spent more time than she'd care to admit choosing her outfit. She finally settled on a simple emerald green dress that brought out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. She was just applying a final touch of lipstick when her doorbell rang precisely at 7. Mason stood at her door holding a small bouquet of white peonies, her favorite flowers, though she couldn't remember ever mentioning that to him. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes appreciative but respectful. "Thank you. So do you, I mean handsome, not beautiful," she stammered, immediately cursing her nervousness. Mason laughed, a rich sound that made her smile despite her embarrassment. "I'll take either compliment gladly." He led her to a sleek black Aston Martin parked at the curb. Alex raised her eyebrows. "Nice car. Thank you. It was a gift to myself when I turned 30, he replied, opening the passenger door for her. As they drove through the city, Alex noticed how Mason seemed to relax away from the hotel. He told her stories about growing up in Chicago, his love for sailing, and his rescue dog, Archie. She found herself laughing more than she had in months. The restaurant he'd chosen was an intimate Italian place tucked away in the North End. When they entered, the owner himself rushed forward to greet Mason like an old friend. "Mr. Drake, so wonderful to see you again. Your usual table is ready." They were escorted to a secluded corner table with a view of the small courtyard garden. Alex noticed several diners doing double takes as they passed. "You come here often?" she asked after they were seated. "Whenever I'm in Boston," Mason replied. "Giovanni's family has been making authentic Sicilian food for 3 generations. I invested in helping them expand to this location a few years ago." "You invested in the restaurant?" Alex asked, finally allowing herself to wonder exactly what Mason did for a living. He smiled enigmatically. "Among other things, but enough about that. Tell me more about your pharmacy studies." "What area do you want to specialize in?" Throughout dinner, Alex found herself opening up about her dreams of working in pediatric oncology pharmacy, inspired by her mother's battle with cancer. Mason listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. "My mother recovered, thankfully," Alex explained as they shared a tiramisu. "But those years showed me how crucial proper medication management is. The right pharmacist can make all the difference." "It's a noble calling," Mason said, his expression sincere. "Much more meaningful than what most of us do." "And what exactly is it that you do, Mason?" Alex finally asked directly. "You've been very mysterious about your work." A flicker of hesitation crossed his face. "I'm in investment management." My firm specializes in sustainable technologies and healthcare innovations. That sounds fascinating, Alex said, sensing there was more to the story but not wanting to press. After dinner, they strolled through the North End, stopping for cannoli at a famous bakery where, once again, Mason was greeted by name. When they reached the waterfront, he suggested a walk along the harbor. "This is my favorite view of the city," he said, looking out at the twinkling skyline reflected in the dark water. "It's beautiful," Alex agreed, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "Thank you for tonight, it's been wonderful." Mason turned to face her, his expression serious. "I want to be honest with you, Alex. I don't typically do this ask out women I meet through work encounters, but there's something about you that I haven't been able to get out of my mind since the first time you served me that whiskey." Alex felt a flutter in her chest. "I've looked forward to your visits too," she admitted. Even though I told myself it was unprofessional, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Mason leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, then deepened as Alex responded, her hands finding their way to his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, they were both slightly breathless. "I'd very much like to see you again," Mason said, his voice husky. Alex nodded, unable to find words for a moment. "I'd like that too." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Mason would take her to dinner whenever she wasn't working or studying, sometimes at exclusive restaurants where they needed to be escorted through private entrances. Other times at hole-in-the-wall places he'd discovered in his travels. Alex introduced him to her favorite bookstore cafe and the park where she went running on weekday mornings. One evening, after a particularly grueling study session, Alex was surprised to find Mason waiting outside the university library with takeout from her favorite Thai place. "How did you know I was here?" she asked as they sat on a bench, sharing pad Thai and green curry. "You mentioned yesterday that you had a big pharmacokinetics exam coming up," he said simply. "I figured you might need brain food." It was these thoughtful gestures that were slowly breaking down the walls Alex had carefully constructed after her last relationship ended painfully. Mason never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never made her feel like she was just another conquest. Still, there were moments when Alex felt like there was something Mason wasn't telling her. Sometimes he'd get calls that would cause him to step away, speaking in hushed tones. Occasionally, he'd mention needing to fly to London or Singapore on short notice. When she asked about his work, he'd give vague answers about meetings and investments. One Saturday morning, Alex was having coffee with her best friend Priya at their favorite cafe. "So how's the mysterious rich guy?" Priya asked, stirring her latte. "Mason's good," Alex replied with a small smile. "He's taking me sailing tomorrow." Priya raised an eyebrow. "And you still don't know what he actually does. Besides being in investments, does it matter? He's kind, intelligent, interesting." "And suspiciously perfect," Priya finished. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen a few times before turning it toward Alex. "Is this your Mason?" Alex stared at the Forbes article headline. "Drake Ventures CEO makes historic $500M investment in renewable energy." The photo showed Mason in a business suit, looking more serious than she'd ever seen him, standing next to a wind farm. "CEO," Alex whispered, scanning the article. According to Forbes, Mason Drake had inherited a struggling investment firm from his father and transformed it into one of the most innovative, sustainable investment companies in the world. His personal net worth was estimated at over $3 billion. "You're dating a billionaire and you didn't know it." Priya's eyes were wide with disbelief. "He said he was in investment management," Alex said weakly. "I just thought he was, I don't know, a portfolio manager or something." "Well, technically, he is managing investments," Priya said with a laugh. "Just a few $1 billion worth." Alex felt a strange mix of emotions: confusion, embarrassment, and a hint of betrayal. Why hadn't Mason told her who he really was? Was this some kind of game to him? The next morning, when Mason picked her up for their sailing trip, Alex was uncharacteristically quiet as they drove to the marina. When they arrived, she was only mildly surprised to see that the boat was actually a stunning 60-foot yacht. "Is something wrong?" Mason asked as they boarded, noticing her subdued mood. Alex took a deep breath. Were you ever going to tell me who you really are? Mason's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. Ah, you've been Googling me. Actually, my friend did. I saw an article about Drake Ventures and its billionaire CEO. Alex crossed her arms. Why didn't you tell me? Mason sighed, leaning against the railing. I was going to. I've been trying to find the right time. It's been over a month, Mason. I know, it's just… When people find out about my wealth, everything changes. Suddenly, I'm not just Mason anymore. I'm a bank account, a connection, a ticket to a lifestyle. His eyes met hers, unexpectedly vulnerable. With you, for the first time in years, I felt like someone was seeing me for me. But it wasn't really you, was it? Alex challenged. You were hiding a huge part of your life. I wasn't hiding who I am, just what I have, Mason replied. There's a difference. Everything I've told you about myself, my background, my interests, my values, that's all real. The only thing I didn't share was my financial status. Alex considered his words. So all those times you were vague about your work. I was trying to avoid the billionaire elephant in the room, he admitted. I wanted you to know me before you knew my net worth. I get that, I do, Alex said, softening slightly. But relationships are built on trust, Mason. How can I trust you if you keep something this significant from me? Mason stepped closer, his expression earnest. You're right. I should have told you sooner. I was afraid of losing what we were building. He reached for her hand. I'm not asking you to understand immediately. Just give me a chance to show you that I'm still the same person you've been spending time with. Alex looked at their intertwined fingers, then up at his face. She could see the sincerity in his eyes. Okay, but no more secrets. No more secrets, Mason promised. The day on the water helped ease the tension. Mason taught Alex the basics of sailing, laughing when she nearly fell overboard trying to adjust a line. They anchored in a secluded cove where they swam and enjoyed the lunch prepared by the yacht's chef, a detail that now made much more sense to Alex. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, they sat on deck sharing a bottle of wine. So billionaire, Alex said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. What's that like? Mason smiled ruefully. Honestly, often isolating. People either want something from you or they're intimidated by you. Finding genuine connections is challenging. Is that why you kept coming to the bar? Looking for genuine connection with the unsuspecting bartender. I kept coming back because of you, Mason said simply. The first night was coincidence. I was staying at the hotel for a conference, but I came back because talking to you for those few minutes was the best part of my day. Alex felt her resolve weakening, and all those helicopter trips and sudden business calls. The real deal, unfortunately. Running a global company means being available at odd hours. That part won't change. Alex took a sip of her wine, contemplating. I don't care about the money, you know. That's not why I'm with you. I know, Mason said softly. That's why I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them. Alex felt her heart race as she realized she was falling for him too, billionaire or not. In the weeks that followed, Mason gradually introduced Alex to more aspects of his life. She met his executive assistant, visited his downtown office, and was introduced to his close circle of friends, most of whom seemed relieved that Mason had found someone who cared more about his terrible dad jokes than his bank account. Alex continued working at the Meridian while finishing her degree, despite Mason's offer to help with her expenses. I need to do this myself, she'd explained. I've worked too hard to get here. Mason respected her independence, though he couldn't resist occasionally sending coffee deliveries to her study sessions or having her car serviced while she was in class. Practical gestures that showed he was thinking of her without undermining her self-sufficiency. The real test came when Alex finally introduced Mason to her family at her younger brother's birthday dinner. Her father, a construction foreman, regarded Mason suspiciously at first. So what exactly do you do, son? He asked as they sat around the modest dining table in her parents' home. Dad, Alex warned. It's a fair question, Mason said easily. I run an investment firm that focuses on sustainable technologies. We try to put money into companies that are doing good in the world while also creating returns for our clients." "Like what?" her brother asked, genuinely curious. Mason described a recent investment in an affordable medication initiative that aimed to bring life-saving drugs to underserved communities. As he spoke, Alex could see her family warming to him, recognizing his passion for the work beyond just profit margins. Later, as they helped with dishes, Alex's mother pulled her aside. "He's not what I expected when you said he was in finance," she admitted. "He really seems to care about making a difference." "That's why I love him," Alex replied, the words coming naturally even though she hadn't yet said them to Mason himself. Her mother smiled knowingly. "Have you told him that?" Alex shook her head. "Not yet. Don't wait too long. Good men who look at you the way he does don't come along every day, rich or poor." That night, as Mason drove them back to the city, Alex was quiet, contemplating her mother's words. "Your family is wonderful," Mason said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I can see where you get your values." "They liked you too," Alex replied. "Even my dad, which is saying something." Mason reached across the console to take her hand. "Thank you for sharing them with me. It means a lot." "Mason," Alex said, gathering her courage, "I need to tell you something." He glanced at her, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "That sounds serious." "It is." She took a deep breath. "I love you, and it has nothing to do with your billions or your fancy yacht." Or Mason pulled the car abruptly to the side of the road and turned to face her. "Say that again." "I love you," Alex repeated, more confidently this time. The smile that spread across Mason's face was radiant. "I love you too, Alex, so much." He leaned across and kissed her deeply, cradling her face in his hands as if she were something infinitely precious. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, Mason rested his forehead against hers. "I was so afraid you wouldn't be able to see past all the complications that come with my life." "The money doesn't change who you are," Alex said. "And that's the man I fell in love with, the one who remembers how I take my coffee and listens when I ramble about biochemistry." 3 months later, Alex graduated at the top of her class. As she walked across the stage to receive her Doctor of Pharmacy degree, she spotted Mason in the audience, cheering loudly alongside her family. The pride in his eyes meant more to her than any material gift could. At the celebration dinner that evening, surrounded by friends and family at one of Boston's finest restaurants, which Alex had recently learned Mason happened to own, he raised his glass for a toast. "To Dr. Alexandra Gordon," he said, his voice full of emotion, "whose compassion, intelligence, and dedication inspire everyone lucky enough to know her. The world of healthcare has gained a tremendous asset today." After dinner, Mason suggested a walk through the public garden where they'd had one of their early dates. The summer evening was perfect, warm, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. "I have a graduation gift for you," Mason said as they reached the small bridge over the pond. "Mason, you didn't need to get me anything. The dinner was more than enough." "This is something different," he said, suddenly looking nervous, an expression Alex rarely saw on his usually confident face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Alex's breath caught in her throat. "Alex, when I walked into that hotel bar last year, I was just looking for a quiet drink after a long day. I never expected to find the love of my life." He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald ring surrounded by small diamonds. "You've shown me what truly matters in life. You've loved me for who I am, not what I have. Every day with you is a gift, and I want to spend the rest of my life returning that gift." Mason dropped to one knee, looking up at her with those piercing blue eyes now shining with emotion. "Alexandra Gordon, will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Alex's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Mason slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into an embrace, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around as she laughed through happy tears. "I love you, future Mrs. Drake," he murmured against her hair. "I love you too," Alex replied, pulling back to look at him. "But I think I'll keep Gordon professionally. Dr. Gordon has a nice ring to it." Mason grinned. Whatever you want, as long as I get to be by your side." 1 year later, Alex stood in the garden of Mason's family estate on Cape Cod, wearing a simple but elegant white gown. As she walked down the aisle toward Mason, who was watching her with undisguised adoration, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. From pouring his whiskey at the Meridian to building a life together, it had been an unexpected path filled with discoveries, challenges, and above all, love that transcended wealth and status. After the ceremony, as they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Mason leaned down to whisper in her ear. "Did I ever tell you why I chose the Meridian's bar that first night?" Alex shook her head, curious. "The company I was meeting with had suggested the restaurant next door, but their bar was too crowded, so I walked into the hotel lounge instead." Mason's eyes crinkled with his smile. "Best detour of my life." Alex laughed, thinking about how different her life would have been if he'd simply gone elsewhere that night. "I guess sometimes the best things happen by chance." "Maybe," Mason agreed, twirling her under the twinkling lights, "or maybe some things are just meant to be." 5 years later, Alex sat in the garden of their Boston home, watching Mason chase their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, across the lawn while their infant son napped in his stroller beside her. Mason had scaled back his work commitments to be present for their family, while Alex divided her time between her pediatric oncology practice and their children. The Drake Foundation, which they had established together, was making significant strides in improving healthcare access in underserved communities, a perfect blend of Mason's business acumen and Alex's medical expertise. As she observed her husband pretending to be captured by their giggling daughter, Alex reflected on how their worlds had collided that night at the Meridian. She'd been a bartender working her way through school. He'd been a billionaire seeking a quiet drink. Neither could have predicted the love story that would unfold. Mason jogged over, breathless from play, and dropped onto the blanket beside her. He pressed a kiss to her temple before gently touching their sleeping son's cheek. "Happy?" he asked, a question he still posed regularly, as if making sure their life together was everything she wanted. Alex leaned into his embrace, her heart full as she surveyed their little family, the greatest fortune they could ever possess. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "More than I ever imagined possible." Mason smiled, the same smile that had first caught her attention across a polished bar years ago. "Me too," he said simply. "Me too."